Beast Machine's episode reviews continue now with Revelations Part 2, Descent. This one finally starts answering things. It took us about 8 episodes to get here, but hey, here we are. We're gonna learn some things. So, episode starts off the way a lot of episodes start off, frankly. Optimus Prime is having the visions again. This time it's absolutely intentional. He's trying to interface with the Oracle directly. He's doing it intentionally this time rather than waiting for it to call him. And it's still not giving him all the answers, but he's getting really angry that people are interrupting him when he thinks he's close to answers. We still do not know. The dreams are still incredibly vague. It shows jungles and vines that have a tendency to like wrap him up, and then shows him like Cybertron the way it is now, and that's supposed to mean something. I'm not entirely sure what it means. I watched this entire series through, and I'm not sure this is relevant to anything other than just blunt force trauma reminding the audience what the general theme of this series is. So it's not the most exciting thing. It's not the most informative vision Primal's ever had. It's mostly just to establish that Primal is still making the attempt. Alright, so let's talk about what really goes on here. Because really, like, Primal in this episode, because he's been put on the bench by Cheetor, really doesn't play a huge factor in this. This episode is all about Cheetor's plan. And Cheetor, admittedly, has a pretty good plan. Instead of just being on the defensive all the time, just waiting for the next Viacon ambush to come by, let's actually go on the offensive. Let's actually take action ourselves. And the action that he hits on is to try and change the Viacon generals back into who they used to be. If Megatron transformed them into what they are now, then obviously they can do something to get them back, right? There's always some way of reversing it. So, okay, not a bad idea, Cheetor, for your first day in full command. So, the idea, his idea that he hits on is to go after Tankor. And guess what? That makes perfect sense. He's the slowest of the bunch, mentally and physically, and he's just a big lumbering target that's going to be a lot easier to catch than Thrust or Jetstorm. Naturally, Black Arachnia has a problem with this. She wants it to be Thrust because she's certain it's Silverbolt. She's still not admitting to the rest of the team that she thinks Thrust is Silverbolt, but yeah, she's really like pouring it on really heavy here. But admittedly, like, I'm actually surprised that she just kind of takes Cheetor's order here and actually kind of relents to it. Okay, fine. All right. So she goes along with it, and Tankor is the mark. Doesn't mean the other Viacon generals are left out of this. Obviously, Black Arachnia is still on Thrust, and is still trying to get him into admitting he's Silverbolt, and he's responding to the name Silverbolt. I think this is the first time she's actually called him by that name. And it actually does shake loose something in Thrust. It shakes loose a vision of Black Arachnia on Earth and the other Maximals. The key to this is that he does mention that they don't look happy. Now, if Thrust really was Silverbolt, why would they look unhappy? So obviously, something is amiss. And it's a nice little small way of hinting that this is not exactly who you think it is, Black Arachnia. This might not actually be Silverbolt. But it's a good tease. It does continue the mystery. It leaves a little clue in there for you to pick up on, which is not bad. Not a bad choice. And yeah, like it carries through this little storyline for Black Arachnia and Thrust fairly well. What else is going on in here? All right, so Tankor is a little bit more obvious about how things are handled. Yeah, it's Cheetor running it's Cheetor running Distraction, and Rat Trap is the one who has to access Tankor's brain once he is available to do so. There's a sequence in this series, in this particular episode, where Rat Trap takes control of a crane and golf swings, or I guess in this case baseball swings, Tankor into the next city. And Cheetor starts spouting off a whole bunch of baseball references. So Cybertron knows about baseball, apparently. There's oddities in this episode, to say the least. This is another episode, by the way, where they did try camera tricks. You can see one on screen right now. I hate that one. I absolutely hate that one. It's literally Cheetor being chased by Tankor on a tiny little planet. It looks like the size of like Cybertron's, not even a moon. It's a really weird perspective, and it's a really weird attempt to throw in a little bit of more visual style in. It just didn't work. What actually did work in this episode is they mixed Cybertronian backgrounds with the anime speed lines. Like, you could still see Cybertron in between the speed lines as Jetstorm and Night Scream were flying, and that actually looked pretty good. Like, that's actually, like, of all the, like, twisted up visual effects they've been trying in this series, that one's probably my favorite so far. It actually looks like something. So, obviously, the big thing here is Cheetor and Rat Trap going after Tankor, and what's going on in Tankor's head when Rat Trap accesses it. Because at first, Rat Trap thinks that he's accessing his own memories somehow, and it kind of seems that way. The scene, we're getting a flashback. We're finally getting to see exactly what happened when the Maximals landed on Cybertron. And the scene is actually very cleverly cut, because at no point do you actually see Rat Trap in the shots until a very specific point where the writers want you to see him. To that point, they do a really good job of hiding him away and making it seem like he's actually looking from his perspective. I don't think the writers looked at the scene, but it felt like the original scene when they were staring at what was going on in the cockpit of the Autobot shuttle. It actually looked like a point of view from where Rat Trap was sitting in the final episode. So even that seemed correct. That's probably accidental. But you know what? I'll take it. It's something. But it's a really cool scene. It's a cool scene to finally see at this point in the series and finally get some answers, some legitimate answers. There is a plot hole you could drive the arc through, and it's one that has always bothered me when talking about this series. When Primal is infected with the virus, like all of them, they're all reverted back to their pre-transmetal forms. They're reduced back to their original base bodies, like you see right there, from when they first scanned beast modes in the Beast Wars. It doesn't really explain why it doesn't, like, strip them completely and revert them to, like, a pre-Earth state. That seems more Megatron style, but we're going to take it for what it is here. I have issue with that scene because Primal's body should not have that information on it. Let's remember, Primal's original body, the one that transformed into the organic ape, was destroyed, and destroyed quite thoroughly by a transwarp explosion. You could literally see his severed face flying into the screen at one point. This episode shows us Optimal Optimus returning back to his original ape form, a form that should not exist because Primal's transmetal body was a second body that his spark had possessed, one that was transmetal from the start. It never had the original ape mode to it. It was transmetal from the beginning. So yeah, Primal's body should not have that data on hand to revert him back to the original, because that body was never the original. Why didn't they let the people watch this show? Why did the writers have to go in blind? It makes no sense. And there's so many plot holes because of it. But the big thing to the whole scene and the flashbacks is to find out that Tankor is actually Rhinox. Now, this for now is going to make previous scene make sense, where Tankor could actually be swayed to the Maximal's cause, at least for a moment. So okay, so we had a slight hint of that before. Once we get farther in, you're going to find out that that teaser was kind of a throwaway and not really representative, and that's really unfortunate. We will get there. We'll get there. We'll talk Rhinox properly at some point. Very soon, actually. But yeah, it's a big threat to know that Tankor is a friend of theirs. Someone that they cannot destroy. We kind of touched on that in the last episode. This really drives it home. Yes, the sparks in these bots are people they know, and they're not people they're going to be willing to destroy. The final scene is the one you just saw. It is our very first full spark removal. Jetstorm actually manages to harvest Black Arachnia's spark. And it's a really good cliffhanger to leave off on, spoiled only by the fact that it's Night Scream watching on helplessly as it happens. He watches the whole thing unfold with the spark extractors and trying to get Thrust to do it. Thrust is hesitant to do it. Silverbolt. Jetstorm goes ahead and does it himself. This whole time, you kind of forget that Night Scream is one of the few Maximals with long-range weaponry, and like really good long-range weaponry. He's got a sonic beam. He's got the beam off his back. He's got his sonic scream. He has his draining cable. He's got a lot of range on him that he saw not to use to stop this from happening. He just kind of watched it happen, which is a really weird thing to realize. So, all that said, Descent gets an enjoyable rating. For a Beast Machine series episode, it is enjoyable. It's okay. It does solve it finally starts giving us answers. It gives us a few more questions to chase. And admittedly, there's some good aspects to the mysteries that they're telling here. There's a lot of weirdness going on in it, but there is something that is enjoyable going on. So that is Revelations Part 2 Descent. Join me tomorrow. We will finish up this trilogy, and we're going to get into some of the real serious stuff that this show wants to drop on us. I will see you then.
It's the bosun's turn. He's looking at TJ's character, and he's just like, what you gonna do?
Right. I blew him a kiss.
I love him. I love him.
What's your problem? He's just gonna pull his hand crossbow and just fire at you.
That's fair at this point.